Good morning. My name is Mark, M-A-R-K, Ruff, R-U-F-F. I am the city coordinator for the city of Minneapolis. Thank you for being here. This gathering is, as we promised, a continuation of communication with the media, with the public, about current status of city services. We have before you a number of experts within city staff who can give you updates on the many crises, the persistent crisis that continue in the city of Minneapolis. I do want to reassure our residents and our businesses that you have high-quality individuals who work every day on the front lines for the city of Minneapolis. Those include our first responders. Those include our experts in technology that are here this morning. Those include our folks who are reaching out to businesses as they seek to recover. And most importantly, they include those who reach out directly to our Black, Indigenous, people of color communities who are most hard hit by the COVID crisis, by the impacts on our neighborhoods, those who live along West Broadway, those who live and work along Lake Street. And we as city employees are daily keeping the priorities of those communities in our, not just minds, but in our hearts. The other thing I want to mention is we are here in front of you, certainly cognizant of what we know and what we don't know, and knowing that the world is changing every day, not just within the city of Minneapolis. And again, I am very proud of the people who work for the city of Minneapolis, the 4,000 people who work on a daily basis to bring you services and to look as far forward as we can for improvements to those services. With that, I want to turn it over to Director Sasha Cotton.
Good morning. My name is Sasha Cotton. That's S-A-S-H-A. Last name Cotton, C-O-T-T-O-N. As our city coordinator stated, I'm Sasha Cotton, the director of our Office of Violence Prevention in the Minneapolis Health Department. And as we think about the circumstances in our city right now, we recognize that we have a lot of challenges on our hands in the sense that we have experienced a number of pandemic and crisis with the killing of George Floyd, the COVID outbreak, and the increased violence that we're seeing in our city. We know that we need to mobilize strategies, working with our community partners and the agencies that the Office of Violence Prevention works with. It will be essential that we work in partnership to develop a strategy to address the violence that we're currently experiencing. One of those strategies is some emergency meetings that we're working on to get input from community, particularly those who are doing violence prevention work on the ground, because we believe that they have the right approach and the voices that need to be centered. That means meeting with them, listening to them, and hearing from them about what we can do collectively to move forward. One of the city programs that we're really leaning into is our Next Step model, which is a hospital-based violence prevention response protocol team, which is doing bedside interventions with anyone who has been hurt by violence that comes into our Trauma One centers. And that's critically important because we know that people who have been injured by violence, one, may be feeling a sense of need to retaliate. They or their loved ones may be feeling the need to retaliate. And we want to interrupt those patterns of retaliation. We also want to ensure that as people are getting stitched up from bullets, unfortunately, we know that that's happening in our city right now, that they're also getting the critical social services that they need, wraparound resources to ensure that they go home to the best set of circumstances after a really traumatic event. Lastly, I'll say that we know that violence, like other pandemics, is a contagious situation. And so we're doing everything that we can do to reduce that spread and work with our partners to address both the unrest that our communities are feeling and the violence as a result. So I will close with that. Thank you very much. At this time, I'll pass it off to the next speaker, who I believe is Louisa.
Hi, my name is Louisa, L-U-I-S-A, last name P-E-S-S-O-A-B-R-A-N-D-A-O, and I am the manager for the Epidemiology Research and Evaluation Team at the City of Minneapolis Health Department. Just to give you a quick situational update on COVID-19, As of today, Minneapolis has 4,455 new cases of COVID-19, of which 174 residents have died related to COVID-19, and 3,967 no longer need to be in isolation. 684 have been hospitalized, and of those, 192 have needed intensive care hospitalization. We continue to see a disproportionate impact on our BIPOC communities, and the trends that we see in Minneapolis mirror those seen in the state overall. In terms of testing, the state testing that happened for community sites closed yesterday. Yesterday was the last day of testing, but the City of Minneapolis Health Department is working with our community partners and with the county and the state to look at additional opportunities for offering free testing for those communities that needed it. And that's all I have, and I'll pass it on to the next person.
Good morning. My name is Velma Corbel. That's V-E-L-M-A, and Corbel is K-O-R-B as in Bob, E-L. And I am just here this morning to give you the first status update of the charge of discrimination that has been filed by the Minnesota Department of Human Rights against the Minneapolis Police Department. As a standard practice, you know that the city attorney is would be representing the city in a matter like this. And the city attorney, Eric Nielsen, is here this morning in case there are questions, legal questions about this matter. So you are probably all aware that the charge of discrimination was served on the city on June 2nd, and that effectively started the human rights complaint process. Soon after that charge was served, the Human Rights Commissioner brought a petition for stipulated injunctive relief to the district court. That order was signed on June 8th. And if you are familiar with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights complaint process, there are some deadlines in the complaint process. There are also some pretty significant deadlines in the court order. Both the court order and the Minnesota Department of Human Rights charge are public documents, and but access to the complaint during the complaint process would be handled in accordance with the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act. And if you have specific questions about that or any of the legal matters pertaining to this charge, City Attorney Eric Nielsen is here, as I said, to answer those questions. So the first significant date with regards to the court order was last week on June 18th. And there were certain Minneapolis Police Department policies that were to be amended and submitted to the Assistant Attorney General. And as you know, it's the Attorney General's office that represents the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. Those policies pertain to neck restraints and chokeholds, the duty to report unauthorized uses of force, the duty to intervene, and authority and methods related to crowd control during protest and demonstration. The next significant date is July 3rd, and that's the date that the answer to the actual discrimination charge is due to the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. And as I said, both the charge and the court order are public documents. There are significant dates along the way. If you read the complaint and if you read the temporary restraining order and count, you should be be able to do a pretty good job of ascertaining when those different things are due. I think one of the most significant things that the Human Rights Department has asked the city for, if I would just permit me a minute just to speculate, is on July 30th, the city attorney shall prepare a report listing the state laws that impede public transparency of police data and or prevent the mayor and the chief of police or impede civilian oversight from disciplining and terminating police officers. And I think that is just to my mind, the Minnesota Department of Human Rights really recognizing that reform is a long, deep process, and it takes a lot of us working together to make the changes happen that we need to see. And I'll stop right there, and the next person up to do an update is Eric Hansen.
Good morning, my name is Eric Hansen. It's E-R-I-K-H-A-N-S-E-N. I'm the city's Director of Economic Policy and Development, and I'm representing the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development. I'm going to keep my mask on because I have a allergy-induced cough, and so I think it's best to just keep it on for now. I've got 5 updates. The first one is around general rebuilding and opening. Last week, we reported about 700 buildings or storefronts impacted. We have increased that to 1,000 storefronts, over 1,000 storefronts, and of those, 140 structures have observable levels of damage. And in that 140 buildings or storefronts, 53 buildings were destroyed, 31 buildings have major damage, 56 buildings have minor damage, and an additional 885 buildings have been affected by the events after the killing of George Floyd. We have resources available for those impacted by the unrest or the pandemic. For those who are looking for incident reports to help with insurance, please call 311. For those who are looking for questions on making repairs or rebuilding your property, call our zoning office at 612-673-5065. We have free legal advice for those that are interested to look at their situations either for property ownership or for leases, and that's at Legal Corps. That number is 612-752-6687. And for all other needs, including those who are interested in advice on opening after potential pandemic closures, can call our small business team, and that number is 612-673-2499. I reported last week that our unemployment numbers are over 100,000 in the city of Minneapolis. That remains constant. The state of Minnesota is reporting over 800,000 people drawing unemployment benefits through the pandemic. The Federal CARES Act allowed for a $600 top-off for unemployment benefits. Those benefits will expire at the end of July, impacting those on unemployment. For those who have lost employment either through the pandemic or from the unrest, should contact the state's unemployment insurance system, and the best way to contact them is online at uimn.org. That's UI, like unemployment insurance, MN, like Minnesota.org. Calls to that group can take a number of hours, so the best way to get a hold of them is online. The city is in the process of 2 disaster declarations. One is through FEMA. On Tuesday, on the behalf of the city and the county, the state of Minnesota applied for a disaster declaration for the federal government for the fires that caused damage to public infrastructure. We have a second disaster declaration that we're doing in partnership with, we're leading in partnership with Hennepin County and the state of Minnesota. The state, in this disaster declaration, we're seeking federal support through the Small Business Administration, and we need businesses' help. We are looking for, in order for us to meet the test of the declaration, we need businesses to report sustained building damages, such as fire damage or business losses or other damages to inventory that are not covered by insurance or not fully covered by insurance, or 40% of uninsured loss. We will have a data source for input on our website soon, but in the meantime, please call the small business team if you want to report any losses that are uninsured, and that's 612-673-2499. The declaration, if it occurs from the Small Business Administration, will open up economic injury loan pools for those that are uninsured within our city. Finally, I want to encourage businesses in Minneapolis to take advantage of the state Small Business Relief Grant Program. This is a $10,000 grant for small business who have been impacted by COVID-19. It's designated for businesses with 50 or fewer employees, and priority will be given to those that were closed by executive order for any period of time. The state has set up minimum pools for businesses that are run by women, veterans, people of color, businesses with 6 or fewer employees, and for those that are in indoor retail or food markets with an ethnic cultural emphasis. Those applications are due on the application period is between June 23rd and 5 p.m. on July 2nd. And if you need more information, either go to the DEED website, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, or call our small business team at 612-673-2499. And I'm available to answer questions. We also have our Director of Housing Policy and Development, our Director of Development Services here to answer technical questions that might arise. And then I'll turn it over to our IT Director, Fadi Fadel.
Good morning. My name is Fadi Fadel, F-A-D-I-F-A-D-H-I-L. I am the Chief Information Officer for the City of Minneapolis, and today we are excited to announce that we will be launching our new city website starting this evening, Thursday, June 25th. Our new website is our new front door through which our residents interact with our city and access our services and access information. In addition to speed and stability, our new website will provide a new user experience through which they can access information quickly. That is done through the way we organize content, a robust search feature, and access by topic in contrast to access by department. The website will be or is optimized for use by any device and any screen size. The language is made simple and clear, in addition to accessibility features. The launch of this website has been expedited to meet the needs of our residents, communities, and local businesses. And the transition will happen in wave. And we say transition, not migration, because we are changing our philosophy of how to engage with our residents by putting them front and center in the philosophy of how information is reflected and accessed. The first wave will include our homepage, that is our front door, and other high-demand main pages, the new search functionality, report issues page, 311 help page, and other feedback mechanisms. This transition will be seamless to the public. Both existing and new websites will share the same front door, the same home page, through which visitors will be able to navigate to the content they're looking for seamlessly, regardless where it resides. This will be followed by additional waves of content transition to the new website and the new website platform. And there has been a lot of engagement work and activities put through that is reflected through this work, and we're excited to continue to push it forward and continue our engagement with the public throughout the life of this project to make sure that it continues to reflect their needs. Thank you.
Now we have time for questions. Question for Sasha Cotton. You had talked about the hospital bedside program. Can you provide more detail about how that works in kind of typical times and how it's changing now in response to the latest string of violence? Are there more people working in that program? Is it being switched in any way?
Sure. Our hospital-based program called Next Step is at our two Trauma One centers, so HCMC and North Memorial. It is continuing to operate, and we have been able to add some staff over the course of the spring. So we're excited about that. There were some limitations as a result of COVID in having staff in the hospital, but we anticipate, and we know this week we already have been able to get staff back into the hospitals, and next week at a more robust rate, we'll be able to have folks responding to bedsides and not just doing follow-up. So we feel like that's a really good place to invest time and resource because of the number and volume of, unfortunately, violent incidents that we're seeing across the city. We want to make sure that people are getting appropriate resources post a very traumatic event, and that those services continue well beyond when they're in the hospital.
Sasha, can you give us an update on, as far as the violent incidents we're seeing, do you have any information right now about if they involve any of the group members that are involved in the group violence programming in the city?
So we do have reason to believe that some of this violence is being driven by groups. We don't necessarily have reason to believe that it's anyone who's been participating in the service provision from GVI, although of course, or the group violence intervention. But of course, we're combing all of the data and police reports to ensure that we can do the appropriate follow-up and work with parties who we believe are vulnerable to becoming the next shooter or the next victim of a shooting due to gang or group affiliation.
Do you have the latest numbers as far as folks who've been wounded by gunfire in the last month?
I do not have those numbers offhand, but I'm happy to get them for you. Those would be captured by MPD.
What are some possible factors or reasons why it popped up, this sudden outburst of violence? Do you have more information on that?
So we really do feel like, as I alluded to before, that this is the perfect storm. Obviously, with COVID, a number of people have lost their jobs and are feeling a deep level of desperation. We also know that there are a number of people who have been released from jails and prisons at an expedited rate due to the outbreak, as well as the unrest that came from the killing of George Floyd. And so tensions are high in our city, unfortunately, right now, and that often results in violence. So we're doing all that we can do and exploring options with community to figure out some solutions, and that's where our focus needs to be right now versus looking at root causes in this particular moment.
Have you spoken to any other city council members about the Department of Community Safety proposals or how this will affect what's being proposed tomorrow?
I know that language is being looked at and that ideas are being considered, but I don't have any detailed information that would have to be answered by city council.
Sasha, are you hearing concerns from community members about, as the city council talks about redoing the police department, either abolishing it, defunding it, that there are people who are impacted by violence who are nervous by this?
Quite naturally, people are uncomfortable. What the city is talking about doing is a very innovative process, and anytime change is proposed, I think it's uncomfortable. I think that it's thoughtful that both the mayor and the council are developing processes that take time to look at what a new vision of public safety might look like and where policing fits into that new envisioning.
Do you get a sense that people are less likely to call the police right now? Is that part of the reason why you're seeing people maybe retaliating? They don't feel like they can call the police to resolve their matters?
So we know that with group dynamics in particular, retaliatory violence is common. So I don't think that we're necessarily looking at this as if people are not calling the police because that's the reason for the spikes in violence. I think retaliatory violence, we know that hurt people. And so when someone has been impacted and hurt by violence, or a loved one of theirs has been hurt by violence, there's a natural inclination for some folks to want to go out and perpetrate acts of violence on people who have hurt them. And that is what we need to be focused on addressing right now. I think 911 is open and available, and we hope that people will use it when they experience a crisis.
Can you provide any more detail about the community meetings that you had referenced earlier? How close are those to being finalized, and are there any particular groups that you're looking at kind of coordinating that effort with now?
So our intention is to do some emergency meetings throughout the next week to really meet with folks who are doing violence prevention work on the ground, both those who are currently in partnership with the city as well as people who we maybe haven't worked with as closely, because we do believe we need all hands on deck and that all options are on the table to explore what we can do in partnership with community to address the current violence.
And are these private meetings you're holding with these organizations, or are these going to be sort of open to anyone in the area?
The initial meetings will be private because we do want to develop strategy, and in order to do that, we need a level of privacy, but we envision hosting some public meetings down the road. Thank you.
Question? Yeah, sort of on the damage side, when we're talking about damaged businesses, is there any breakdown of how many of those are city-owned buildings and businesses, and how much that might ultimately cost?
Can you repeat the question to Eric, just so other people can?
So the question was around damaged buildings, if I heard it correctly, and the breakdown between city-owned buildings and the costs, total costs. So I don't have the breakdown of how many city buildings that were impacted. They're in these numbers, but we can get that broken out for you. We have some infrastructure. The Director of Public Works last week talked about infrastructure being impacted, and that's part of the FEMA declaration and the fires that are impacted. So we will work on those numbers for you. As far as the costs, we are still assessing that damage. Most of the damage is going to happen through insurance companies, and it'll take some time to figure out what that true number is. Our estimates are, a couple $100 million, and that's just estimates, and so we'll get there as we go. But I also want to stress that there's two different categories. Or three different categories. There's the buildings that were damaged. There were the businesses and residents that were impacted, and then there was the impacts to the community. And when we total those all up, it's going to be far in excess of the damage of the buildings, because there are every business in Minneapolis was impacted by the unrest. Every business has been impacted by the COVID pandemic, and those losses are real and substantial. People's communities have been impacted, and cost of living have gone up, and so that we're categorizing that as we go. But those we want probably not have the true sense of the value, but it's double or triple of those hundreds of millions of dollars if you look at the wealth that's lost in community.
A question for Velma. If you want, do you want to follow this up? Yeah, sorry.
Paul Blue with Fox 9. Just a quick question of what you're hearing from business owners out on the street. I mean, I can't imagine there's 100% commitment to rebuilding or wanting to continue the journey with the city of Minneapolis. Can you tell us how many people have said, we're done, we're out, we're moving, anything along those lines in terms of the frustrations that you might be hearing from business owners?
So if I understand the question, it's what have we heard from businesses and who's staying and who's going, essentially. Okay. We are very fortunate in the city of Minneapolis to have a network of community-based organizations that have really strong relationships with businesses throughout the city. We continue to work with those organizations. We are hearing a lot of very substantial concerns about doing business in the city. Most notably, what is the security plan for the city, and how are they going to be, if people do tend to reopen, how do they maintain safety? The city's police department continues to operate. The city's police department continues to respond to 911 calls, but some are reluctant, as you would imagine, to call 911. And so we are encouraging businesses, if they want security, to go with licensed security companies, and to work either with our community-based organizations, or you can call us if you need some additional assistance. But it's not rosy. It wasn't rosy with the pandemic, and this has just exacerbated the situation.
So you're seeing a lot of private security coming in at this point?
I can't quantify that, but we've heard some interest in it.
Thank you. Sorry, Brian.
No problem. Ms. Corbel, I just wanted to follow up with you about a comment you made about this July 30th deadline coming up in the civil rights case. Give me a sense of, the city attorney's going to compile these state laws that are, as you mentioned, are making it hard for the police department to be transparent and discipline officers and make that stick. Can you get a sense, do you have a sense that the legislature is any more or less open to that after what's been going on in Minneapolis with all the protests and the demands for change? Do you think that can ply the state legislators to maybe be more receptive to some of these law changes?
You know, I can't speak for what's in the legislator's mind, but what I can tell you is that the moment is now, and I think we all understand the urgency to make the change that's being demanded by the community, because it's pretty obvious from all of our perspectives, whether you're council, mayor, community, legislature, that the current model of policing is not serving all of our residents to the fullest extent. And so I would hope that the legislature would take this up.
Are there some laws that you have in mind that are, from the perspective of the civil rights director, that are in the way of real change in the police department?
Well, in terms of the detail of what's being amassed, I will refer that over to the city attorney's office. But from a civilian oversight perspective, which, as you know, is a division inside the Civil Rights Department, you may recall back in 2012, we went to the legislature to ask for some a stronger state statute for civilian oversight, and we were unsuccessful there. And as a matter of fact, that statute was actually weakened in that session. We were asking for some subpoena power. We were asking for the ability to be able to make determinations on the police investigations, and we did not get that. So I'm hopeful that in addition to what we asked for in 2012, that there are some other things that have been identified by city staff and mayor and council.
Thanks.